No traction control, no fairings, just metal, gas, and guts. The 60s were when motorcycles grew teeth and riders learned what fast really felt like. From British twins to Japan's first screamers, these are 15 fastest 1960s motorcycles ever made. Starting with Honda CB77 Superhawk 305. Before superbike was even a word, Honda had already built a mini one. The CB77 Superhawk might have been a 305 on paper, but on the road, it embarrassed half the British lineup. Light, revvy, and refined, it brought car-like civility to motorcycling. Electric start, 12-volt electrics, and an overhead cam twin that spun happily to 9,000 revolutions per minute while bigger engines ran out of breath. Cycle World's early 60s test logged a two-way top speed of 104.6 miles per hour, or about 168 kilometers per hour, and a quarter mile in 16.8 seconds at 83 miles per hour. Now these were giant killer numbers for something that didn't leak oil. Its 305cc SOHC twin made roughly 28 horsepower, but the real secret was the chassis. Honda used the engine as part of the frame's structure, giving the bike balance and poise that older machines could only dream of. In motion, the CB77 felt alive. The carbs gulped sharply off idle, the revs climbed clean past 7,000, and the little twins settled into a high revolutions per minute hum that felt more aircraft than motorcycle. Braking was still drums, and the skinny bias-ply tires demanded smooth, precise lines. But that was the point. The Superhawk was about precision, polish, and the new idea that small bikes could be genuinely fast. In an age of rough-running twins, the CB77 was the future. Next up is the Suzuki T500 Titan. By the end of the 60s, the open road still belonged to big British twins until Suzuki rolled out a 500cc two-stroke that could run the ton all day without melting down. The T500, first sold as the Cobra in US brochures, arrived with oil injection, a 5-speed box, and engineering that let its air-cooled twin hold full song for miles. Factory figures and period tests line up between 105 and 112 miles per hour. Cycle World recorded just over the ton, while Suzuki's own datasheet boasted 181 kilometers per hour or 112 miles per hour and 13.2 seconds over 400 meters. For 1968, that was serious pace from a so-called half-liter. Output sat near 47 brake horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute, delivered with a fat mid-range instead of a violent hit. Early magazine runs showed low 14s to high 13s in the quarter, which is right in step with many larger four-strokes of the day. You still rode it like a fast 60s bike though, twin leading shoe front drum, skinny bias-ply rubber, and a duplex cradle that preferred sweeping A-roads to hairpins. Suzuki lengthened the swing arm soon after launch to calm the front at high speed, and the model evolved into the better-sorted Titan that earned its name. What made it special was its usable speed. It was a big two-stroke that stayed cool, stable, and civilized while living past 100 miles per hour. In a world of oily leaks and nervous handling, the T500 felt like the future. Number 13, Moto Guzzi V7. By the end of the 60s, Italy answered America's booming twins with something altogether different, a transverse 90 degrees V-twin, shaft drive, and electric start, all wrapped in manners that felt crisp, not crude. The first-year V7 wasn't built for drag strips, but it could sit at the ton and keep pulling. Period data from Cycle World and Motorcycle Classics puts a stock bike at about 106 miles per hour or 171 kilometers per hour, which was serious highway pace for 67 on narrow tires and drums. Power claims vary though. Factory notes mention around 40 horsepower, while later retros place it closer to 50 horsepower, but the feel is the same. Broad mid-range, long gearing, and a smooth, almost turbine-like surge through the upper revs. The pushrod twin drove a 4-speed gearbox and shaft final, keeping everything steady at speed. With a dry weight of around 230 to 243 kilograms, the V7 wasn't feather-light, but it carried itself with confidence. From the saddle, speed meant stability. The heavy flywheel gave it grace through sweepers. The twin leading shoe front drum demanded planning, and the bike rewarded smooth lines over last-second heroics. Cycle World's 1968 review read like a love letter to progress. Reliable electrics, real comfort, and a top end that far exceeds legal limits, all without the oil stains or numb hands common to the era. Then we have the Yamaha YR1 350. Before the RD series made Yamaha a two-stroke legend, there was the YR1, the bike that showed a small twin could run with the big boys. In 1967, the YR1's 347cc parallel twin changed what middleweight performance meant. It was light, loud, and built to revers. It had a motor that spun past 9,000 revolutions per minute with the confidence of a race bike, not a commuter. Factory data claimed 173 kilometers per hour, or approximately 107.5 miles per hour, and 400 meters in 13.8 seconds. Numbers that sounded like fantasy until magazines confirmed them. The secret wasn't brute force, but brains. Autolube oil injection, aluminum cylinders, and a 5-speed return gearbox made it as refined as it was fast. Output sat around 36 horsepower at 7,500 to 9,000 revolutions per minute and 24 pound-feet of torque, all delivered with that classic two-stroke urgency once the revs cleared 7,000. On narrow tires and drum brakes, you learn to brake early, hold your corner speed, and let the twins sing. Early testers called it one of the most balanced small bikes ever built, fast, flickable, and civilized enough to ride daily. And when the road opened, the YR1 would howl past the ton, while bigger, heavier machines struggled to keep up. Now this was a real 100 miles per hour two-stroke that proved lightness, not displacement, was Yamaha's secret weapon. Moving back to the Brits, Triumph. Bonneville T1 2650. The Bonneville T120 was built to chase the horizon. Under the tank sat a 649cc parallel twin that made around 46 horsepower, climbing closer to 52 horsepower in later trims. That might not sound wild today, but in the late 60s, it meant 110 miles per hour on a good stretch. And this was real, repeatable, ton-plus speed in a time when most bikes still lived in the 90s. The magic was more than the power and more about the feel. Twin-em-all carbs gave the Bonnie its signature throttle snap. The 4-speed gearbox let you keep it singing, and the light chassis made backroad blasts feel effortless. By 63, Triumph's unit construction frame had tamed the shakes, giving the T120 a balance between speed and civility that few rivals managed. Of course, you still had to ride it right. Drum brakes demanded early markers. Narrow tires made you smooth whether you liked it or not. But when everything clicked, the Bonneville felt like flying on a budget. Quarter-mile times in the low 13s proved it wasn't all sound and shine. The T120 was fast, usable, and alive. It was a proper British road burner with just enough manners to take home. And that's pretty much why it earns a spot on this list. At number 10, BMW R69S. Not every fast bike screams about their speed. Some, like the BMW R69S, just do their thing without the noise. Smooth, quiet, and deceptively quick, this was the thinking rider's tone breaker at the end of the 60s. Beneath the modest lines sat a 594cc boxer twin, good for around 42 horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute. It ran through a 4-speed gearbox and shaft drive, and when everything was tuned right, it would show a genuine 175 kilometers per hour, or about 109 miles per hour. BMW built it for endurance, not antics. The Earl's leading link fork kept the front composed under braking, and the big drum brakes could haul it down firmly, once or twice, before the fade set in. The R69 US that followed swapped in telescopics, but both shared that unmistakable sense of calm competence. Reviewers didn't gush about thrill, they marveled at composure. Cycle World called it fast enough for any touring situation, which in 1962 meant 80 to 90 miles per hour cruising, hour after hour, with more in reserve. After 1963's crankshaft vibration damper, it got even smoother. From the saddle, the R69S was a lesson in grace. The Boxer's steady thrum, the hint of lift from the shaft when you rolled on, and the stability that made miles feel shorter. The bike didn't care about sprinting, but it effortlessly covered distance without breaking a sweat. Up next is the Velocette Thruxton 500. If the late 60s had a heartbeat, it was the thump of a Velocette single echoing down an empty A road. The Thruxton wasn't a racer with plates. It was a racer, only just tamed for the street. One big Amal GP, carb inhaled through a bellmouth, feeding a hand-built 499cc OHV single with a high compression head and big valves. On paper, it claimed 41 horses. In real life, it felt like all of them were angry and wide awake. But here's the thing. The Thruxton wasn't built for show-off speed runs. It was built to endure. Period testers said 41 horses were conservative, and they were right. It would cruise at the ton all day without breaking a sweat. You just had to respect it. A twin leading shoe front drum, skinny tires, and a 54-inch wheelbase that demanded smooth hands. Ride sloppy, and it would remind you who's boss. That stamina came from legend. Back in '61, a Velocette Venom averaged over 100 miles per hour for 24 hours at Montlhéry, the first 500 single to do the ton for a day. And that record still stands. Give it a long straight and the right gearing, and she'd brush 115 miles per hour. But the honest figure, the one real rider's quote, is 110. And with drum brakes and bias plies, that was plenty exciting in the '60s. Moving on to the BSA Rocket 3. By the end of the '60s, the world was chasing bigger engines and higher revs, and BSA wasn't about to get left behind. Their answer was not another twin, but a wild, canted forward 741cc triple. Now this was the same heart as Triumph's Trident, just tucked differently in the frame. 3 Amal concentrics feeding 3 hungry cylinders, about 58 horses at 7,500 revolutions per minute, and a sound that could make a grown man grin through his helmet. A healthy Rocket 3 would do around 120 to 125 miles per hour, depending on who you asked. Cycle World's figures had it running the quarter in 13.57 seconds at just under 100 miles per hour, and with a clean run, some riders even slipped into the low 13s. In the late 60s, that was properly quick, the kind of speed that left big twins huffing in the mirrors. What really made it special, though, was how it delivered that speed. That triple-cylinder surge was silkier than any twin, but still raw enough to feel mechanical and alive. Twin leading shoe drums, slim tires, and a steady, long-legged chassis made it more A-road rocket than lane basher. It loved sweeping bends and fast straights. Crack the throttle, tuck behind the clocks, and you'd hear that 3-into-3 wail rise into a metallic scream as the needle swept past the ton and just kept going. That was BSA's last big roar, 120 miles per hour of British thunder before the superbike storm rolled in. Number 7. Norton Commando 750. The Commando won the 1960s by being fast in a way you could actually live with. Norton took its big 745cc vertical twin, dropped it into the new isolastic frame to tame the vibes, and suddenly you had a bike that could sit near the ton all afternoon. Around 58 horsepower at about 6,800 revolutions per minute, and real-world top speeds in the 115 to 116 miles per hour range. For a British twin, that was serious business. The numbers back it up too. Cycle World's early tests in the '70s saw bone stock 750s running quarter miles around 13 flat, right on the 100 miles per hour mark. And sure, there were rumors of 130 miles per hour Commandos, but that was the production racer special, not your showroom roadster. The regular Commando didn't need to brag. It was already fast where it mattered. What made it brilliant was the way it felt from the seat. Smooth, steady, civilized even. The isolastic system soaked up the shakes that used to rattle other twins apart, so you could cruise at 90 or 100 without feeling like your fillings were going to fall out. If you keep the mounts dialed in, it tracked aero straight. Let them go loose, and yeah, you'd feel it wander. Every Commando owner learns that dance. That's why it earns a place here. It's fast enough to run with the best and refined enough to do it every day. The Commando proved that British superbike meant more than noise and oil. It meant class. Still with the Brits, Triumph Trident T150. By the end of the '60s, Britain had finally had enough of Japan's smooth multis stealing the spotlight. So Triumph fought back the only way it knew how, with a third cylinder and a ton of attitude. It was a BSA Triumph combo that also brought about the BSA Rocket 3. The Trident's 741cc triple was a bigger twin with an extra jug tacked on. Both bikes had basically the same interior, but their frame and engine placement set them apart. The Triumph gave 58 horsepower around 7,200 revolutions per minute. It promised smoothness and speed, and the first US road tests proved it wasn't bluffing. Cycle World clocked a stock T150 at just over 117 miles per hour, two-way average, running the quarter in 13.7 seconds. In 1968, that was no joke. That was right up there with the fastest things you could buy on two wheels. The Trident wasn't about brutal bursts, though. From the saddle, it had the signature triple surge. It was smoother than a twin, but hungrier than a four. You had twin leading shoe drums, 19-inch tires, and a long 58-inch wheelbase that made it feel steady even when the road blurred. Most healthy examples lived in the 115 to 120 miles per hour bracket, which made the 105 miles per hour spec sheet figures look like polite understatements. So why does it belong here? Well, it was Britain's final stand before the superbike wars began. The next fast bike is the Norton 750 Atlas. By the end of the decade, big twins still ruled the roads, and Norton's Atlas was one of the last to do it with real swagger. Under that classic silhouette sat a 745cc OHV twin pushing around 55 horsepower at 6,500 revolutions per minute. Twin Amal carbs, a 4-speed box, and that signature chain drive put it right in the 110 to 115 miles per hour zone, with a few lucky bikes brushing 119 on the right day. That's proper ton-plus territory, especially when you remember it was all happening on skinny tires and drum brakes. What made the Atlas special wasn't just its power, it was the poise that came with it. That famous featherbed frame carried the motor low and steady, so even at 100 miles per hour, the bike felt planted and predictable, while the twin thumped through your palms. You didn't have to wring its neck, you just roll the throttle, and it just went. Early Cycle World testers loved that balance. Strong, steady, and civilized enough to ride every day. Sure, it had its quirks. The vibes could creep in if the tune went off, and those drums needed breathing room between stops. That mix of muscle, manners, and real-world speed is exactly why the Atlas still earns its place among the fastest bikes of the 60s. Next up is number 4, Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 500. So here's where the decade stopped being sensible and went completely off the rails. Kawasaki looked at the polite British twins and said, let's make something terrifying. The H1 Mach 3 took a 500cc frame and stuffed it with a 2-stroke triple that hit like a stick of dynamite around 6,000 revolutions per minute. And it didn't stop there. With roughly 60 horsepower, a 5-speed gearbox, the acceleration felt like it was being launched off a cliff forward. Cycle World's 1969 test told the story in numbers: 119 miles per hour two-way average and a quarter mile in 13.2 seconds on period tires and drum brakes. A Kawasaki test rider, Tony Nicosia, later ripped a 12.96 at just over 100 miles per hour. For a 500 in the 60s, now that was outrageous. And from the saddle, it was pure chaos. The triple barked, the front wheel went light, and if you weren't lined up straight when those expansion chambers hit, you'd find religion fast. With drum brakes at both ends and tires as narrow as your wrist, the H1 wasn't forgiving, but that's exactly what made it iconic. So should it be here? Absolutely. Because in 1969, a 500 that could break 120 miles per hour and crush the quarter in the low 13s was a statement, one that forced you to pay attention to it. The Americans brought the Harley-Davidson XLCH Sportster 900. CH stood for Competition Hot, and that's exactly how it felt. The XLCH was Harley's way of saying, we can play this speed game too. Under the tank sat the Ironhead 883cc V-twin. High compression, magneto ignition on early models, 4-speed box, and a chain drive ready to throw rooster tails of gravel. Official reports said 55 horsepower. Cycle World figured closer to 50, and later sheets pushed it to 60 at around 6,800 revolutions per minute. However you cut it, it had the lungs, and with short gearing, it was a handful in a straight line. So, how fast could it go? Real-world tests pinned it between 115 and 120 miles per hour, depending on the year and tune. Even the milder XLH variant hit 114 miles per hour in Cycle World's test, so the CH's bragging rights were well earned. In 1969, that made it one of the quickest showroom V-twins on the planet. From the saddle, the CH was born for speed. Kickstart only for many years, twin-leading shoe drums, about 495 pounds wet, and a long wheelbase that tracked straight but pushed wide if you got cocky in a corner. At number 2, BSA A65S Spitfire Mark III. If the mid-60s had a smell, it was hot oil and ambition, and BSA had both. The Spitfire Mach 3 was Britain with its sleeves rolled up, built to prove the old twins still had fight left in them. Under the tank set a 654cc OHV parallel twin with high compression pistons and, for 67, twin Amal concentrics, breathing through proper filters instead of those temperamental race carbs. Claimed output was around 54 to 55 horsepower, and the dyno wasn't lying. Cycle World's test bike clocked 117 miles per hour two-way average, which made it one of the fastest showroom roadsters you could buy. Across the pond, Motorcycle managed an even spicier 119.2 miles per hour average with a best of 123. Perfect conditions, sure, but proof that the Spitfire had real claws. Realistically, you could call it a solid 117 miles per hour machine and sleep well knowing your numbers were honest. The speed felt pure and mechanical. That close ratio 4-speed let you wind it tight, then the twin would settle into its stride, pulling long and straight past the ton. And it earned its place because it proved a Brit twin could still run with the best. Finally, the Honda CB750. This is where the 60s stopped being old school and shifted straight into the future. 4 cylinders across the frame, overhead cam, front disc brake, electric start, all the stuff you'd expect on a race bike, suddenly sitting in a showroom with a price tag. The CB750 was revolutionary. Winded out, and it doesn't scream or snarl. It is smooth, steady, and confident. Past 7,000 revolutions per minute, the 4 Cajuns are in perfect sync, the engine's pulling clean, and the needle just strolls past the ton like it's nothing. Period figures called it good for about 123 to 125 miles per hour and quarter miles in the low 13s. Now these are real tested numbers, not just factory claims. On paper, it's just 67 to 68 horsepower from a 736cc SOHC4, but the magic was in how it delivered it. That long-legged 5-speed, the smooth power band, and a hydraulic front disc that actually worked, suddenly braking, didn't feel like an act of faith. Cycle World quoted Honda's bold claims of 130 miles per hour in 12.3-second quarters, then admitted the bike felt complete at speed. It had no oil puddles, no kickstart ritual. You just had to hit the button, listen to that 4 clear its throat, and go chase the horizon. It was the world's first everyman superbike. That wraps up this list. What other bike from the 60s deserves a mention? Let's know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the ride, like and subscribe for more bike videos.